I flew to Ireland to visit the abandoned farmhouse where my grandmother grew up, a home my mother recently inherited that hasn't been occupied for 20 years. What I found inside was surprising, but it had nothing on what happened next after I posted it online. Today, I'm sharing the full story. What if your 401k came with a fire pit and a lake view? That's the question that inspired it all. I'm Katie Cline, and living in New York City meant buying a home felt impossible. So I decided to flip the script and buy my second home first. When I'm not there, it doubles as a short-term rental, covering its costs, building equity, and even turning a profit. And best of all, it gives me a place to vacation for free. What 401k can do that? Every week, join me as we hear from real people who've done the same and experts who can help you do it too. If you thought owning any home, let alone a second one, was out of reach, this is the show for you. This is Second Home First. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Second Home First. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today, we have quite the story to discuss. Last week, I flew to Ireland with my best friend from London to visit the abandoned farmhouse my mother inherited, the home where my grandmother grew up, which had sat empty for the last 20 years. I expected to spend a few days reconnecting with my heritage and my best friend and taking the first step of many on the long road to restoring the home. But what I never saw coming was that sharing this on social media would mean returning home to New York just 5 days later to discover that this story had taken on a life of its own online. Now, stick with me here, because if you're like me, hearing someone talk about their follower count is an immediate eye roll. But this is not about becoming an influencer. This is about attention, about resonance, and maybe most importantly, about storytelling. It's about the outpouring of supportive messages I received from people cheering me on and sharing their own stories of heritage, history, and dreams of visiting Ireland. Maybe it was family. Maybe it was heritage. Maybe it was the idea of bringing something forgotten back to life. Whatever it was, something about this story struck a nerve with people around the world and made them think, I need to know what happens next. If you're here because of that, thank you. I've always believed that travel is life-changing, but this last trip defied even my own very high expectations. If you are a longtime listener of Second Home First, thank you. I'm really excited to share this story with you. And if you're new here, welcome. This show is all about taking the unconventional route in life, about building something that can set you up financially for the future without postponing your joy until retirement. Because unfortunately, what I've experienced firsthand is we don't all get those golden years, so we shouldn't defer our happiness today for someday in the future when the government says we're able to retire. Today, though, I am sharing the full story behind the Irish farmhouse my mother inherited, how it ended up in our family, what happened when I finally returned to it, the internet's response, and crucially, how I'm thinking about what comes next. Super quick interruption. If you are enjoying this episode, please take a second to subscribe to the show. It's completely free to do so, and it helps more people discover Second Home First. Also, if you prefer to listen or watch elsewhere, just DM me Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, and I'll send you those links. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? My grandparents immigrated to the United States from Ireland in their late teens. They didn't know each other while they were living in Ireland. My grandmother was from County Sligo, having grown up in the house that we're discussing, and my grandfather was from County Kerry. They met in the most hallmark of ways at an Irish-American dance in the Bronx. They fell in love, got married, moved to Queens, and raised my mom and her two sisters there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to know them very well. My grandfather passed away before I was born, and my grandmother died when I was 5. I do have one memory of her, though. We were at some sort of country store, and like most 4-year-olds, I wanted a piece of candy. My mom was telling me no, but then my grandmother swooped in and bought it for me. As the mother of a 4-year-old girl myself, a daughter who is actually named after my grandmother, I completely understand why my mom was saying no. But I also really appreciate how sweet it was that my grandmother wanted to buy it anyway. When I was in my early 20s, I learned that because of my grandparents, I could apply for dual citizenship with Ireland. At the time, I was living in a gem of a rent controlled studio apartment on the Upper East Side. And the process of getting my dual citizenship took more than a year, but eventually I became an Irish passport holder. That passport really changed the trajectory of my life. Eventually, it allowed my husband and I to move to London without needing sponsorship to live and work there. But my favorite part of the application process wasn't receiving the passport at the end. It was actually gathering the paperwork to apply. I had to find my grandparents' birth certificates, death certificates, their marriage certificate. And on their marriage certificate were both of their addresses at the time when they got married. My grandfather lived across the street from me on the Upper East Side, and my grandmother lived just 4 short blocks away. And this was crazy because no one in my family even knew that my grandparents had ever lived in Manhattan. We all knew about the Bronx, we all knew about Queens. So it felt like a little wink from them telling me that I was exactly where I was meant to be at that time. Like many Americans, I grew up proudly claiming I'm Irish whenever someone asked me about my heritage. But for my entire childhood, I'd only seen Ireland in photographs and on TV. Traveling there felt like a fantasy. The flight was really long and the tickets were really expensive, and it felt impossibly far away. I honestly didn't think I'd ever be able to visit. Unlike his sister, my great uncle stayed in Ireland, living in the farmhouse we're discussing until 20 years ago. Before any of us grandkids were born, my mom, her 2 sisters, and all of their husbands went with my grandmother back to visit. And apparently, the house only had an outhouse at the time. After I was born, my great uncle came to visit us once in America. And I remember it feeling like the biggest deal in the world that someone from Ireland was coming to our house. I was very young, so I don't really remember too much, aside from the fact that he wore a quintessential flat cap. To my childhood brain, he almost felt like a magical leprechaun. My mom went to really great efforts to stay in touch with my great uncle. Phone calls, letters, putting together a box every year at Christmas time. I know how much she wished she could travel there again to see him, but the cost just made it feel like a pipe dream. Unfortunately, 20 years ago, my great uncle suffered a stroke. That was when he moved out of the farmhouse and moved into assisted living. My mom and one of my aunts flew over immediately. And a few months later, my mom flew back again, this time with me, my dad, and my sister, my first ever trip outside of the country. We were there to help him settle into his new home, painting walls, unpacking boxes, doing really anything he needed. That trip became my introduction to the country I'd heard so much about. And of course, no surprise, I loved it instantly. The verdant farmland looked like a patchwork, the cows, sheep, horses around every single corner, and the pubs where, very excitingly, a 19-year-old was allowed to legally order a drink, even though my dad tried desperately hard to embarrass me at every turn. It was just magic. About 2.5 years ago, unfortunately, my great uncle passed away. He left the farmhouse that he had moved out of, the place that my grandmother grew up in, to my mom and her 2 sisters. They were so moved by this that he would leave that to them. And they talked about restoring it. They dreamed of restoring it, despite knowing the extremely poor condition it had been left in. They wanted it to be a place where future generations of our family could gather together and honor our heritage. But then, as it happens, life intervened. About 6 months after my great uncle passed away, I also lost both of my aunts. These were women who were like second mothers to me, and I lost them both in the span of 9 days. One of them had been sick, the other hadn't. It was completely sudden. And to add insult to injury, in that same span of 9 days, I also lost my dog of 10 years. Combined with my mother's declining health, the dream of restoring that house seemed to disappear overnight. And that's when I decided it fell to me, the eldest grandchild, to keep the dream alive. I am a sucker for sentimentality, if you can't tell. And knowing how much that home meant to my mom, to her sisters, to my great uncle, and to my grandmother, I really couldn't bear the thought of it being forgotten. So last week, I took the first step in that process. I took the red-eye flight to Shannon Airport, meeting up with my best friend from the UK. And can I just say, may we all have a friend in life who is willing to spend their hard-earned money and their hard-earned PTO days on heritage quests through abandoned farmhouses. Straight from the red eye, our first order of business was to meet with one of my great uncle's neighbors. I had received his phone number and his email address from the solicitor, the lawyer, and what a strange email that must have been to receive. But he answered me and he confirmed that we were able to stop by that afternoon. So I brought him a box of chocolates from New York and he invited us inside for a cup of tea. We also met his father and they told me a few stories about my great uncle, which was really cool. Most kindly of all, he told me that he had gone ahead and cut a path to the front door through the brambles for me. We then got back in the car. We drove the 1 minute up the street to turn down a path to the house that four-wheeler tire tracks were really the only thing guiding our way. It's like through a green patch with plants growing in from either side. If you know me, you know I am obsessed with hospitality. And if you don't know me, you now know that. And that is a lot about what this show is about, usually. That's what my other podcast, Sweet Success, is about. And in hospitality, we talk so much about the importance of the arrival experience and how the first 10 minutes of a guest stay sets the tone for their entire trip. At one of my vacation rentals in upstate New York, which is called Trout Landing, one of the biggest selling points to me was the fact that the gravel driveway wove through the trees to bring you to a house that's set really far back from the road. I thought it was just so magical. And that also made me really giddy at this farmhouse's location. Most of the surrounding homes are all set on the road, which logistically makes a lot more sense. And while they are in light years of better condition than this home, this one already had charm on arrival in spades. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. If you're listening to the show, I know making memories with family and friends is super important to you. And that's why I'm excited to introduce you to Flightographer. Flightographer connects travelers with local photographers in more than 350 destinations around the world. But it's more than just a photo shoot. It's a way to capture meaningful memories and experience a place through a local's lens. When I look back on past Flightographer photo shoots I've done, I don't just see pictures, but special moments preserved. I remember the feeling of that day and the story behind every shot. Whether you're celebrating a milestone birthday, a family vacation, or a special getaway to your second home, Flightographer is there to capture the moments you never want to forget. To book your own Flightographer shoot, visit the link in the show notes and use code SHF25. That's S as in second, H as in home, F as in first, 25 to get $25 off your first shoot. When I was finally ready to rent out my vacation home, I had no idea what to charge guests. Thankfully, that's when I found Price Labs, a dynamic pricing tool that helps me automate pricing like a pro. It's simple. Price Labs uses real-time data to automatically adjust my rates based on local demand, nearby events, and booking trends. It's easy to use, lets me set my own minimum and maximum prices, and keeps my pricing smart and competitive without any manual work. If you want your vacation home to pay for itself or even turn a profit, you need Price Labs to help you get the most from every booking. Visit the link in the show notes and enter code SECONDHOMEFIRST, all one word, for a 30-day free trial plus $10 off your first invoice. And now back to the show. When we reached the first gate, I was brought back to 20 years ago. It's so crazy how that happens, isn't it? Before arriving, if you had asked me what the house looked like, I had like a very, very hazy idea. But once I saw it, I felt like, oh, of course, that's it. Like it all came rushing back to me. It was really strange. On one hand, feeling completely familiar, and on the other, the weight of what we were actually undertaking starting to sink in. We decided to leave our tiny blue rental car there since we were actually terrified of it getting stuck in the mud. And after opening that gate, there's this magical bridge over a river, a bridge that's definitely falling apart, but details. And then there's a second gate to open. These are farm gates too. To the left were huge barns, all cleaned out and possibly still in use by others. In front of us, a stone shed with half of the roof missing. And to the right, the house. And thank goodness that kind neighbor was so nice to clear a path to the door, because I have never seen something this overgrown in my entire life. Aside from that path that he cut for us to the door, the growth all around the house was up to the roof. You could not tell if there were any other windows or doors or if walls were falling down. You could not see a thing. There also seemed to be a raised walled garden in front of the house, but again, it was almost impossible to tell because of all of the growth. I expected the door to be super rickety, something that a strong hip check would allow us to be inside, but it was solidly shut. So I knew that finding a locksmith would be priority number one. I had messaged the solicitor for a recommendation, which she sent to me, super helpful. But since by the time we got back to the hotel, it was after 5 p.m., I knew it wasn't something that I was going to be able to do that day. And in fact, I actually told myself I needed to manage my expectations. This isn't New York City where everything happens instantly. But by the next morning, I quickly saw how wrong that assumption had been. I had reached out to the locksmith that she had recommended. He wasn't available, but he suggested another person who might be. That person also wasn't available, but he suggested someone else. And before I could even reach out to that person, my phone was ringing. It was him, the third recommended locksmith, explaining that he had heard from the other two locksmiths what I was needing and that he could be there in 30 minutes. I mean, take that, New York. He asked me a few questions about the lock, where it was on the door, how long it had been locked for. And just from those answers alone, he knew exactly what we'd be working with. We met at the house and he got straight to work. Opening that door felt both exciting and terrifying. What was waiting for us on the other side? The locksmith thought he was hired to remove and replace an old lock, but what he probably didn't realize was when he said yes, he would also become my emotional support person walking us inside. Thank goodness he was there. He lent us flashlights or torches, as my British friend who was with me would say. And he walked with us from room to room, which made me feel a whole lot less scared than I would have been without him there. At one point, I actually said to him, "Can you come with me, please?" Because I was so nervous. The place was truly a time capsule, and it was shockingly well sealed. Of course, there were spots with water on the floor and what looks to be mold on the walls. There was even a closet door that when my friend just touched it, it disintegrated instantly. But mostly, it just looked like time had stood still. A few of the things that stood out to me were first, the clothes hanging to dry on a line in the kitchen. This is what caused the biggest lump in my throat when I was there. To think of my great uncle going about his day and then something happening, the stroke, that would mean he would never come back to take those clothes down, really felt like a life interrupted. It makes you think about what your own home would look like if you were pulled away from it one day unexpectedly, never to return. Second, all the sticks near the fireplaces. The locksmith explained that for 20 years, birds would be making nests on top of those chimneys and some sticks would fall down each time. Third, you would have thought the house would have smelled really bad, but strangely, it wasn't all that noticeable. We saw at least two bird skeletons, a pile of dead woodlouses in a drawer, what I now know is a girdle, religious artifacts, and so much more. We spent some time moving cautiously from room to room, opening drawers, peering into cupboards, and trying to piece together the story of my great uncle, the story of living there. Every item seemed to answer one question and subsequently raise three more. I wondered a lot about what his daily life looked like. What was a typical Tuesday? His idea of a good day? The last meal he cooked in the kitchen, and why did he need two stoves? It's strange how quickly someone can start to feel present again when you're standing in a space they left behind. I even found a box that was sent to him by my grandmother. She had died 14 years before he moved out of this house, so about 34 years ago. So I can only imagine how old that package must be. Still, her name and her address were on the return line. And I have to say, it looked an awful lot like my mother's handwriting. So I have to wonder if my grandma said, "Hey, bring this to the post office and send it to your uncle for me." As meaningful as it was to finally be inside, it also made another thing abundantly clear. There was a lot of work ahead. With our new keys in hand, we went to the hardware store to buy wellies, gloves, flashlights, and more. And the man that worked there was beyond helpful to us, not only helping us find what we needed, but giving us recommendations for landscapers, electricians, and other tradespeople. We then went to a local cafe for lunch. And once I was connected to the Wi Fi, I saw that something else was happening. In less than 24 hours, a video that I had posted the night before from going to the house for the first time had nearly 400,000 views and had drawn in nearly 8,000 new followers. Within 5 days, that first video would have 2 million views. Another video, over 8 million views. The actress Octavia Spencer would start following along. Kristen Chenoweth would comment on a post. A producer would reach out about filming a docuseries. By the time I landed back in New York City, my following would have grown by 160,000 people. Honestly, as I watched those numbers tick up, all I could say over and over again was, "What is happening? What is happening? What is happening?" That's genuinely how I felt. It was so cool, but also so crazy at the same time, completely unexpected. I have received thousands and thousands of messages and comments from people telling me about their own farmhouses, their own restoration projects, their own family heritage, people offering to make window coverings and wreaths for the home. And overwhelmingly, I have just received so many messages of support, of people cheering for this project. But despite all the excitement online, there was, of course, still plenty of work to do on the ground in Ireland. And next up, most importantly, was to meet with the landscaper that the gentleman at the hardware store had recommended to us. I also stopped by the solicitor's office to just say hello and thank her for all of her work with the estate. And of course, visited my great uncle's grave to bring flowers, pay my respects, and most of all, thank him for entrusting us with this piece of our own family history. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. You finally bought your dream vacation home. Now what? Your goal is for it to pay for itself, but between managing bookings, guest messages, and cleaners, it can feel like a full-time job. That's where Lodgify comes in. Lodgify is a comprehensive vacation rental platform that makes it easy to manage and market your second home, even if you're just getting started. From syncing your calendar across Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com to automating payments and guest communication, Lodgify simplifies it all. It's built for beginners and comes with free one-on-one onboarding to help you get up and running fast. To make your second home start working for you, visit the link in the show notes and use code HOME20 to receive an additional 20% off their yearly and bi-yearly plans. Interior design is one of my favorite parts of buying a second home. I love creating a beautiful space. But let's be honest, staying on budget, managing orders, tracking deliveries, and juggling countless retailers can get overwhelming fast, which is why so many hosts turn to Minoan. With Minoan, you can shop more than 180 brands you love all in one place. That's brands like Crate and Barrel, Samsung, Anthropologie, Article, Casper, and so many more. They give you access to better than trade pricing, something typically reserved for professional designers, allowing you to save on every purchase. They keep every order, delivery, and receipt organized in one clean dashboard. And the best part, there's no membership fee, no subscription, no catch, just a streamlined approach with big savings. Once your second home is set up, Minoan can even make it shoppable. Your place basically becomes a four-walled influencer. So after guests spend a weekend obsessing over your couch or those sheets or that coffee maker, they can scan your QR code and order the exact same item for their own home. You earn a commission, no extra work required. To furnish smarter, visit minoan.com/secondhome to sign up and receive a free $25 in credit. Finding the right cleaning team has been absolutely crucial to the success of my second homes. They're my eyes and ears on the property when I'm not there, spotting issues early,
keeping standards high, and helping me wow guests time and again. But finding someone local you actually trust, that wasn't always easy until I found Turno. Turno connects you with vetted cleaners who understand the demands of short term rentals in your specific market. Their app makes everything simple, from auto scheduling your cleans to photo and video checklists that ensure your property looks exactly the way you want, and even automatic payments after each clean is completed. Click the link in the show notes to check out Turno and get $25 off your first cleaning.
And now back to the show. Overall, I was so touched by how welcome I was made to feel on this trip, not only online, but in person by the locals that I met. And it reminded me of my first trip to the country 20 years ago. And I'll never forget a different one of my great uncle's neighbors said to me then, "How long are you home for?" And my teenage brain just thought I had misheard him. So I said something like, "Oh, we go home on Saturday." But he quickly corrected and he said, "No, how long are you home for?" And like gestured to the land, to the ground, to being there. And honestly, I was floored. I felt like, who, me? This American girl who's never stepped foot in this country before? Simply because of my family, my lineage, my roots, he spoke to me as if I belonged. It almost triggered a bit of imposter syndrome in me, but being spoken to like that, not as a visitor, as a tourist, but as someone who had come home, was deeply powerful and something here I am 20 years later still thinking about. This trip made me think about that question all over again. I've spent most of my career in hospitality. I own 3 short term rentals. I host 2 podcasts, one of which you are currently listening to now. Thank you very much again. And it's safe to say that I think and talk a lot about how to make people feel welcome. Hospitality can take so many forms, whether it's a beautiful hotel, a great meal, exceptional service. But really, at its core, I think the Irish are onto something. It's really about belonging. I've lost count of how many people, both in real life on our trip as well as on the internet, said some version of welcome home to me. I think that's also why every single thing we managed to accomplish so far happened through people helping people. The neighbor who cleared the path, the locksmith who showed up because the other 2 locksmiths recommended him, the hardware store employee who connected us with a landscaper and electrician, the solicitor who answered all of my questions and then some and pointed me in the right direction again and again. Every step forward has happened because someone knew someone and wanted to help. And in a world that can sometimes feel pretty cynical, especially here in New York City, that has been a wonderful reminder that community still matters. So, if you've made it this far into the episode, I bet you're wondering, what's next? Great question. I think this will be a very long process, not to mention a costly one. So, I am just trying to focus on taking the next best step, one step at a time. Right now, I think that's a few things. The first is making sure we have all of our paperwork saved: property lines, access to deeds, all of the details. Second, the solicitor told me about an Irish photographer who captures images of abandoned farmhouses. I want to reach out and see if they'd be interested in capturing my great uncle's home before we start to move or displace anything. Third, landscaping. It's impossible to tell what state the home is truly in, what's salvageable, what's not, without being able to see around it. And finally, how can we document this process? To me, this is about so much more than just restoring a derelict building. It's a story of family, of lineage, of preserving the past while modernizing for the future. The outpouring of interest on the internet tells me that others feel similarly. So, should this be a YouTube channel, docuseries, a TV show? I guess the sky's the limit. I went to Ireland thinking I was going to visit a house. Instead, I came home with a deeper understanding of where I came from, a whole new appreciation for the people who helped preserve that connection, and what feels like the beginning of a much bigger journey than I ever expected. Whether this becomes a YouTube channel, a docuseries, a television show, or simply a project my family works on quietly together, I know one thing for certain: this isn't really about an abandoned farmhouse. It's about family. It's about belonging. It's about honoring the people who came before us while creating something for the people who come next. And if the last week has taught me anything, it's that a whole lot of other people seem to care about those things too. Thanks for listening to Second Home First. If you liked what you heard today, be sure to sign up for my free weekly newsletter at buyyoursecondhomefirst.com, where I share the simple 4-step strategy to help you do the same. If you have a minute to subscribe, rate, or review the show, or even send a favorite episode to a friend, that would mean the absolute world to me. And if you want to be a guest on the show, have a question you want answered, or a topic you think I should cover, send me a note at hello@buyyoursecondhomefirst.com or on social media at buyyoursecondhomefirst. I personally read and respond to every single message. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I can't wait to see you all again next week. The content shared on Second Home First is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment or financial decisions.